Hey, it's good to see you today. My name is Philip Thomas. I'm here with Tom Burns from Redeemed Idiot. This is our Day After podcast, where we look at the sermon that we preached yesterday and kind of just unpack it a little bit more. We're kind of doing this one. We're actually doing this one the day after, but we've already done one podcast today, so now we're having to change our focus. So we may, if we don't make sense, that's why. We don't really know what we're talking about. But no, so yesterday. Looked at just in general, looked at the 10 Commandments. Basically, I'm looking at how our church can provide a copy of the 10 Commandments to be placed in classrooms in the Elgin School District, because there was a law that was passed this year in our state house that the 10 Commandments can be placed up on the wall of classrooms. And I kind of was just laying that out. In some ways, this is in response to Nehemiah. Nehemiah going back, rebuilding the wall that is crumbling. I do kind of view the 10 Commandments as being, they were not, this isn't my opinion, they were a foundational principles to the forming of our country. Mm-hmm. Not that the 10 Commandments would all be encoded in law, right, but the principles behind them would be right, and that they kind of help to form the ideologies, the principles behind our country, right, and how it is set up and ultimately would be governed. Right. I tried to explain a little bit of I do believe the government needs to stay out of religion and stay out of our faith as much as possible, right? So I don't like this whole thing. I don't like that there was even a law that had to be instituted, right? But it was, right? And so now the way the law is written is the schools don't have to put them up unless they are provided to them. And so that's kind of what we're looking at doing. And then I tried to express my wrestling with this and understanding the dangers, and I actually think that this whole argument really points out the spiritual battle that we are truly in. The fact that this is even a contentious issue in our society that was founded on these principles, that it's contentious whether they're up in a classroom or not, is pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. But it is. And it also divides the faith community. And I brought that out, right? That the pastor at First Baptist in Austin, I don't know him, this is his opinion. I actually understand his opinion, where he's coming from.
You're such a nice guy.
I experienced that in seminary. So I understand those arguments. Where I disagree fully is that I don't believe he recognizes the spiritual battle that we are in. And we've talked about it throughout Nehemiah. We need to recognize as a country that there are other ideologies, that their goal is not to coexist with a godly tradition or a godly faith, or even coexist with our way of life. Their goal is to destroy that. Mm-hmm. Right? And while we do wrestle, and we should wrestle with religious freedom and religious liberty, and people have the right to worship other gods. I'm not saying you have to worship only one God. I'd love it if everybody worshiped one true God, but I know that they don't. But that does not mean you allow ideologies that want to destroy you. Right. That doesn't mean you give them an easy path, right? So I think there's a lot of Christians that don't recognize the spiritual battle that we are in. And this little act of providing the 10 Commandments and then also providing teachers, if they want to use it, with a way of presenting this as here's how the 10 Commandments have impacted our history, and here are the principles behind them that lead to a healthy society no matter what, right? That's the perspective that we are coming at this from. Mm-hmm. Not we want this country to be a Christians only nation, and you have to adhere to each one of these 10 commandments, or you're thrown in jail.
Right.
That's not what we're doing. So I encourage you to listen to this sermon. It went a little long because I got on a couple soapboxes. Apologize for that. But that was the premise of the sermon. So what were thoughts? I know you were listening to it as you were driving.
Yeah.
So what came to your mind?
So I'll say it right off the bat. First thing that came to my mind is, you had an introduction, and then he's like, we're going to go into Exodus, and we're going to do the 10 Commandments. And like you said about when I was teaching on Revelation, a time period that we could actually identify when Christ comes. You'd made the same. I was like, oh, where's he going with this? Yeah. Because so many people try to use numbers and come up with some weird philosophical or their own interpretation. Like, here's the day Christ comes back, and all these crazy things. So it's completely understandable why you said that. So when I'm driving, I'm driving up, and you had your introduction, and then you said you're going to do the 10 Commandments. Like, oh no, where's he going with this? And it's from historical,
from things that you've experienced,
from what I've experienced. That a lot of times, majority of the times, people teach on the 10 Commandments, and they'll put this law thing like it's all about sin. And as an example is like when you talk about don't use the Lord's name in vain, they'll break this down to mean, don't swear, don't use 4-letter words, and things like no, that's not what it's talking about. And then they'll figure out how to make the 10 Commandments say don't smoke, don't drink, don't chew, don't do drugs. I'm like, where are you getting this?
Don't date anybody who does, right?
Yeah, and and I'm like, that's not what it says. You're completely missing the context of it. So that was like, oh boy, is he gonna go down one of these roads? Yeah. But you didn't, and I never seen it in the way that you presented it, but it makes perfect sense and understand because you brought in the constitutional aspect of how it really kind of helped form our country and a society as we escaped from the Church of England.
Yeah.
So there wasn't an imposition to make us be a religious nation, but there were some principles behind it that helped form the Constitution that we in place. And I think what you did by demonstrating the principle behind it, you weren't doing it in a negative. Is like how we can look at this and go the positive. If we employ these things, it's a positive, because when I taught on it as well, it's really about loving God and loving others. And then you broke out the principle behind it. And I'll just say, I don't think there's anybody really on this planet that would disagree with the principle behind it. To honor mom and dad, to have a good family. I don't think there's anybody like, no, we don't want good families. Yeah. There's no one out there that would think that it's okay to murder somebody. And now when I'm saying murder, if you take, for instance, like 2 gangs, from different sets, and one gang does a drive-by and kills someone of this gang. Well, they both don't believe murder's right, but that's from a retaliation. Yeah. Like, oh, I can do this because they killed my guy.
There's a justification to it.
Right. And you're upset because someone murdered your friend.
Yeah.
And so no one disagrees that murder is wrong. I don't think anybody would disagree that adultery is wrong. I don't think there's a married couple go, no, we all need to commit adultery. That's a good idea. That's great for our society. That lying, bearing the false witness. Oh yeah, we should be lying all the time.
Yeah.
And down to, oh yeah, we should covet and be the Joneses and what everybody else has and take those things. I don't think anybody would disagree with those principles.
Yes.
And to form from our Constitution formed on those basic principles. Now, if you don't believe in God, okay, got it. That's the point. You don't have to believe in God, but these came from God.
Yes. Yeah.
And those principles make sense and apply to anybody and everybody. And it's like, apply this, and maybe your society might be a little bit better.
Yes. Yeah.
And I will say this, when you were teaching on it and you're going through each one of them, and I see where you're going with it, and you got to the one on lying. That's the one that smacked me in the face and just stood like, you know what? I almost think that's the core problem. And what I mean by that is we develop laws and stuff. And I know I'm going to make some people mad right now. And please understand where this is coming from. Doesn't apply at all. But we have laws. We're a nation of laws. But in order to get what we want, we use manipulation laws.
Oh, yeah.
We lie about what it really says or what it really isn't. And this goes to the lawyer side. I'm sorry, lawyers, if you think I'm picking on you. But we manipulate it for money and to get what we want and not see the whole truth. And as an example, and this is the best way I can make an example, if someone commits a crime, whatever the crime is, and you need the evidence, and someone finds the evidence, but yet they violated their constitutional freedoms, that you couldn't do that, they'll go in court and say that's inadmissible.
Yeah.
That evidence we can't use. We're throwing it out because it violated their civil rights.
Yeah.
Well, my problem is this. Does it still tell us the truth?
Right. Yeah.
If it does, then you still employ it. Now, if someone broke the law to violate someone's civil rights, then you try that person for violating the rights. We're not concerned about the truth.
Yeah.
We're just concerned about our truth and what we want it to look like. Yeah. And I think that's the lying point, is like where it's kind of like deceived our entire country and our laws and the way they get morphed, is because you got really smart lawyers going, well, let's reword this. Well, that's not really sex, because the word is that Clinton said. Oh, come on, man. I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
You know, so point is your principle behind everything made a whole lot of sense. And it's something we should be, as a society, steeped in. So employing these and placing these in a classroom of our kids, you know, that's basically under the state, under a county jurisdiction of being taught, parents are not there. There should be something in there that helps bring out that principle that we need to be kind of seeing by. And I don't think anybody would do that. Yeah, that's right. I should probably want to have a good family.
Yes.
You know, I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
you did a great job.
I agree. I also think because we're in that spiritual battle, that's not where the conversation is being had, right? Where it becomes more of, well, should the government get involved with this? And then I think from people who agree that the Ten Commandments should be in the classroom, sometimes can come across nearly as, this is a victory lap and we're just going to do this to kind of rub it in your face that and that's not what this is about either, right? And I'm also not delusional to think that this is what's going to solve our problems as a society, that we put the Ten Commandments back up on the wall and magically everything's going to get better. No, it's not. In fact, it may actually cause some strife. And I don't like that, but that's where we are. And I do, again, I struggle with things like this. And, but there were a few things that really pushed me over the edge to say, you know what? I think this is something that we should do. This is a law that was passed that gives permission for people to provide the Ten Commandments to schools, and then they have to put them up. The law is very specific on what you can do. I don't even like the version that they chose of the Ten Commandments because, well, you kind of mentioned it. It says, thou shalt not kill. Well, no, it actually, the Hebrew word there is thou shalt not murder. Mm-hmm. There is a difference between murdering and killing. Right. Unfortunately, our legislature, in all their wonderful godly wisdom, thought that it was better to go with this version. Right. Now, so there's limits. I'm not anti-government, but I don't think the government helps in most cases. That would be a good place that I'm at. But there is a role for government, and so I struggle. They've even kind of butchered this a little bit, where it's not going to be as effective as it could be. But when you're in this spiritual battle, when you have opportunities to try to push back a little bit against the ideologies that want to destroy, I think we should take it, right? And then, you know, and I mean, there are a lot of Christians, and you know, who are going to be against this and who think that we shouldn't do this. Okay, I would like to ask though, if you're against putting the Ten Commandments in because you're like, no, the government should not push any religious ideology, were you equally outraged? And for example, if you're going to do a lawsuit against this, were you equally outraged when the ideology of transgenderism started to be taught and pushed in the classroom? Were you equally outraged, and did you take the same actions against the government supporting that? If you did, okay, right? However, that's usually not how it works, right? Because again, that's not understanding the battle that we're in. Those ideologies, as they are being pushed in our schools, and I know for a fact there are schools that will start the day in talking with their children, and ask questions like, well, do you feel like a male or a female today? This happens in elementaries, not all of them, and probably not even the majority. I'm not saying that, but that does happen. That is an indoctrinational ideology that, whether we recognize it or not, that is actually connected to pagan worship. That is an evil ideology. So if our government is going to allow that religious ideology in, you know what, we better push back against that. And so I think it is important for us to do this, and then pray that it's received in the light that it's supposed to be, which is why I'm also going to write up the principles behind the Ten Commandments that I believe would apply to someone who does not believe, to an atheist, right? That they could still possibly agree with these basic principles. Even the ones of that are very religious in nature. The first four are, you can't argue, are very religious in nature, right? They are about our relationship with God. But the principle behind them is actually healthy for a society as well, right? You have no other gods before me. One of the principles, secular, if you will, I don't like that term secular because nothing's secular. You will worship something. It's either going to be God or it's not God. But the principle behind that is that it's important to recognize that there is something more than us, right? Even AA recognizes this. Now they've kind of watered it down a little bit.
They call it a higher power.
Which by the way, side note, AA is a completely biblical Christian ideology that recognizes that you need Christ in order to overcome your addiction, but to make it palatable to the masses, we change to higher power. Side note. Right. But even that's actually a good example, because they're like, okay, we don't want to force people to become Christians in order to get clean, right? But that principle of recognizing that there's something higher than you is so important, right? Well, that's important to our society as well, is recognizing there's something more, there's something greater than, right? The idea of idols, not creating idols. We need to be real careful with that, because where does that lead? That nearly always leads to tyranny, because man creates man-made idols. So then we create our own systems of government to solve all of our problems. And so what eventually happens? You start worshiping that system of government. You have the Caesars. Where did they eventually got to? They started seeing themselves as God. You have the line of kings, and that we broke away from. We broke away from King George, right? That idea that the king became above everything else, right? That's an idol. Our country was founded on the principle that our government is not an idol. It is not to be worshiped.
Right.
That's an important principle, whether you believe in God or not, right? And frankly, we aren't teaching those principles,
right?
But so all of the Ten Commandments, I believe, have that kind of societal impact, in addition to a religious faith impact. So my hope is that maybe by doing this, it can start some conversations that maybe at least people will look at the positive principles behind it, how they lead to a healthy society. And then guess what? Sometimes that will actually lead to someone finding the source of these wonderful principles. And that leads you to the one true God, which is ultimately why there are people so against this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want even the opportunity that someone could come to know God through this paper on the wall.
Exactly.
Right.
No. Yeah. And I think when you brought the point of, oh boy, the teachers are not, there's no law enforcing teachers to teach the Ten Commandments or what it means. No. But I think, to your perspective, or what you're saying, or what you have said, and especially we watch the service on Sunday, is because this country, the United States of America, we're talking about any other country, it had a founding principles that were based upon the Ten Commandments. Not a force that you had to worship God, because we escaped from King of England. Like, no, we're not playing these games no more. But at the same time, because there is a foundational, historical United States of America aspect to this within our Constitution, in the principles behind it, that a teacher can bring that into a historic point. Like, look, this is how these apply. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have to go, okay, this is what God said, teaching the Ten Commandments in a biblical format, but and how we were established as a country. There's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think teachers should be teaching, this is me, should be teaching religion in school. Reading, writing, arithmetic, social arts, the things that educate someone to get to either their life, to move on in jobs, whatever, or go to college, whatever. That's where it needs to stay. Because if you try to force, then that's where you go with the church and the state. When the state comes in, the government's like, no, you're going to teach this. Then you just brought church and state together. And I am against it. I don't want the church being in charge. I want it to be a separate entity, but you still have that freedom. So that way you don't open a Pandora's box at, so now I got an Islamic teacher going to teach this to students, and I got a Buddhist one. Teach. No. You stick with the basic fundamentals to get through life and do jobs, leave the religion, the faith to the churches, to the people. But there is a foundational aspect that this country was founded on the Ten Commandments, not Islamic as Sharia law. It's this. It wasn't founded on any ideology. It was founded on the concept of this to build a constitution for a positive society. We have fallen from it. So maybe come back and go, hey, if we start applying these principles, if you worship God, that's up to you. They did come from God. They are in his book, in his word. Cool. Go worship him. But let's apply this stuff.
You can actually apply these principles without believing that these came from Mount Sinai. And you can believe all that stuff is fake, and still the principles actually help a society. Right? Which ironically is a argument in favor of, they were created by a God who created the world and happens to know how it works best. So therefore he gave us these principles. But you can do that. And that's where this does not violate a separation of church and state.
No, not at all.
This is simply teaching the role that the biblical foundational principles had in the founding of this country. And you can find plenty of quotes. And again, not all of the founders are in heaven right now. They didn't all believe in the sacrificial gift of grace that Christ gave on the cross, right? But they did believe in these principles, and I think we have to teach those. If you're going to be a school system that the government has any place in, well, you have to at least teach the true foundational principles of how our government started.
Right? Exactly.
And that includes the Ten Commandments.
It definitely includes the Ten Commandments. And I'll be fair on all this. So the concept of the principles behind it, and not every person that was behind all this, or in the constitutional buildup and the development of colonies and et cetera, were Christian. If let's use that term generically, just we're not Christian, not really. Okay, they might be a God.
We don't know for sure, but chances are there were some that were not. Right?
Oh yeah, because a lot of them were so burnt out on the whole concept of God because of, I'll say, the Church of England was
King George. Yes.
Yeah, so not all of them were, but they did recognize this makes sense.
Yes,
I don't believe in your God or God, but this does make sense for a healthy society.
Yeah,
and I only say this to be fair. So if you take obviously we talk a lot about Islam. If you take Islam, I do believe it's an apostate religion. It's a false religion in that context of denying of who Christ is. However, one of the things that they teach that are supplemental into their society outside the Sharia law, but the things that Christ even taught, not even the Ten Commandments, just like they apply those. I wish our society would recognize things and be the way you are in terms of your love for others that we aren't. So I'm not, you have to be open-minded and be honest and be critical. Go, okay, hold on. Yeah, I don't believe in Islam and Sharia law and all these things, man, you guys do have some good principles. And if you listen to their prayers, they're actually very positive, good prayers. There's like, yeah, I think those are positive, good things.
Yeah.
Same thing then. So it's not wrong to just quit being so closed-minded and go, okay, now this makes sense. Why can't we have these type of principles? Whether you want to believe it comes from God or not, but these are positive things. So why do we not want our kids to learn this and go, yeah, maybe that would be kind of cool that as they grow up, maybe they can start employing this into their families, into their towns, into their cities, into their governments, and all the way up to the U.S. And maybe someone wants to become president someday. We need to like employ these principles. Let's get back to basics.
Which by the way,
what's wrong with that?
Which, by the way, the vast majority of the history of our country, we have done that.
Mm-hmm.
The Ten Commandments were actually in curriculum up until probably the 60s, whenever we all went freaking insane.
Yeah.
Right. This is not new to our country, right, to have these principles taught.
No, it's not.
The Bible was actually used as basically a textbook to teach people how to read in early schools in our country, right? So that's why in some ways this is a silly argument, but I understand the argument,
right?
And it does bring out we are in a spiritual battle right now, and we need to find ways to just keep engaging the culture in healthy ways, and that's what we're going to try to do with this. I have no doubt there'll be some pushback in different areas, but I think in the way that we're going to try to present this, you really have to hear what you want to hear to be against it, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so I think we need to be looking for ways that we can engage this society as well. And kind of talked about that. Each individual, you have an opportunity to share the true message of what is true and what is right in your circles, right? And we need to look for opportunities. When there's opportunities for us to push the cause of Christ, we need to do that. I have determined, and I think others in our church has determined, that by providing the 10 Commandments, even though this isn't perfect and I'm not going to overblow what it does, it is a way that we can hopefully start conversations that do point people ultimately to Christ. But even if they don't, they're historically based and something our schools should be teaching anyway.
Right.
And they're principles that would help our society, whether you connect it with God or not.
Right.
So to me, it should be a win-win, right?
It really should be.
But unfortunately, it's not seen by that as with everybody. But that shouldn't stop us from trying.
Right.
So, all right. Well, we could keep going on, but be praying. I have no idea what I'm preaching on next week, so we'll see what. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Are there 10 more commandments that we can keep going down? I bet I could find it.
If you want to go play with Leviticus,
I'll just open up Leviticus. Yeah.
And we'll just be one of them churches that.
Yeah. Everybody will be asleep. It's like, all right, we'll talk about not wearing blended clothing. So get rid of your poly blend clothes.
Oh, wow.
There's all kinds of those fun laws in there.
Okay.
So I hope that you have a wonderful week. Thank you for joining us. You can always join us at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings here at Journey. You can also watch, we live stream on YouTube, Facebook, and in our Journey Elgin Church app as well. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.